Good afternoon. Today we will dive into the transformative world of open banking, exploring how it's reshaping the financial landscape and empowering consumers like never before. By embracing open banking, financial institutions can unlock new growth opportunities, enhance economic resilience, and promote seamless data portability, which in turn will drive innovation and consumer satisfaction in the financial sector. We will be recording the webinar today. The webinar will be sent out via email to all attendees following after the call. And feel free to ask any questions in the Q&A chat on the right. Today, I am joined by Tyler Brown from CCG Catalyst and Deep Varma from Alkami. My name is Jamie Lang, and I will be your host for today's Open Banking Masterclass. I'm the product owner in our API platform space. At Alkami, I focus on blending consumer needs and cutting-edge technology to deliver an unparalleled digital banking experience. I leverage my skills in software product management and strategic roadmaps to ensure that our API digital platform remains at the forefront of innovation. Now let me formally introduce our speakers. Tyler Brown is an author, speaker, and strategist who covers trends in global consumer finance. He spent the last 9 years as an industry analyst, first in buy-side equity research covering financial services, followed by B2B research and consulting for the banking industry. As a senior research analyst at CCG Catalyst, Tyler publishes industry research, commission thought leadership, and weekly articles on banking and fintech. He also leads research-based consulting engagements. Tyler, welcome. Very excited to have you today. Tell us a little more about your experience before joining CCG Catalyst.
Thanks for having me, Jamie. I'm actually really excited to be here today. Before CCG Catalyst, I would say my start working as an industry analyst, specifically in the market research space for banking and fintech, was at Javelin, where I was in retail banking. And then I moved on to Insider, where I was also in the banking space, and have since moved on to more of a bank tech and fintech implementation focus, which is one of the reasons why I'm so excited to be here.
Last but not least, Deep Varma came to Alkami with over 20 years of Silicon Valley experience, building scalable and reliable distributed systems and underlying platform capabilities to serve high-performing traffic. He also brings deep expertise in artificial intelligence, big data, and building world-class engineering teams, a proven technology leader. Deep has a track record of setting and executing the innovation agenda for market-leading SaaS companies and scaling infrastructure for growth. Deep, before coming to Alkami, you were CTO of another banking organization. Tell us more about how that provided an incredible background for today's conversation.
Thank you, Jamie. Thanks for hosting me, and I'm looking forward to it. So before joining Alkami, I was the CTO of Varo Bank, and just for the audience information, Varo Bank is the first digital bank which is being, certified by, we got our charter from Federal Reserve, from Office of Currency Controller, and FDIC, and this is where we have built the technology from the ground up. And that experience led me to Alkami because, our industry is going to go through a massive transformation, and one of the transformation we're about to talk now. So that experience with the rest of my Silicon Valley technology experience enables me to come to Alkami to allow to take this transformative layer of the banking industry. So I will say that's how it helped me to shape up my career in the banking side.
Wonderful. That makes sense. I'm going to start with you, Deep. What is open banking to you?
Open banking to me, and I'm going to explain this from an end user point of view or the consumer point of view or a member point of view, because there are different terminologies have been used in our space. So this is Deep Varma, who's a member or a consumer of a financial institution. Open banking to me is I hold that data. This is my information when I go and perform my transactions, when I do certain actions, because it's my data. How do I am enabled to decide who to share my data with? And on top of it, I should be the one who gets the most benefit out of my data. So to me, open banking is consumer driven economy where consumers are deciding on the passenger seat who to share the data, when to share the data, and let me as a consumer get the most benefit out of this data. So that's how I think about the open banking.
Deep, I really like that consumer driven perspective because it really hits at the philosophy of what open banking is. For me, too, if you zoom out a little bit, there's the policy perspective, and then there is the technical perspective, which that whole consumer concept integrates with. So, on the technical perspective, you have these data providers, you have the banks, or potentially other financial institutions or financial services providing consumers data at their request for their use, oftentimes to a fintech or some other third party via some infrastructure provider, and then reaching the end consumer. From a policy perspective, it's that regulation and enforcement of the consumer's ability to access their data with some prescribed technical ability to do so. It really depends on market. But I know, as we're going to talk about a little bit later, we have the CFPB in the United States that's starting to put this philosophical framework into practice as policy, and then nudging some technical development that actually we've already seen quite a lot of on its own in the last 10 years.
Yeah. And I'm going to say this is where I think consumer protection also, and I think, Tyler, what I like is what you're talking about, the policy, the frameworks on top of it, right? Because that's how we need to operate. So love to hear the perspective from you also. So thank you for sharing that.
Definitely. Kind of sets the tone for what we want to talk to you about today. We're going to dive into the four pillars of open banking in the U.S. Deep, I'll let you kind of give an overview of what we want to kind of explain and cover in each of these four pillars today.
Sure. Thank you, Jamie. I'm going to take people a little bit into the historical journey of 2003. I don't know how many of you remember. In 2003, there was a Wireless Local Phone Number Portability Act was passed in 2003. What does it entail? It means I, as a consumer, can change my service provider and I can still keep the same phone number with me. So that was passed in 2003. And, being I was part of that change also, and I was to some extent, working with the Berkeley and writing the papers on this topic, I see open banking in the similar way of 2003 change what happened. And that change in 2003 impacted, there were the four major pillars impacted, and that's what we are about to see with the open banking. Number one is the consumers or the members like you and me. They play an instrumental role in that. The number two is the financial institutions, the institutions who are providing services to me, like my checking account, my saving account. And we are going to come to the third one, which is the economy. How this open banking in the macro climate, how does it impact the economy? Because the innovation is the one which drives the economy. And frankly speaking, in the US, we are lagging behind some other countries where the open banking is in place for a very long period of time. As we look into those top three, the fourth one, which is going to become the most interesting thing in the coming years, how do I, as a consumer, carry that data with me, which is already there in this mobile device with me, and I go and decide who to share. I can be on one of the branches working with a teller, and I can say, here is my data. Please take this data and put it into your system. So these are the four pillars of the open banking in the US. As we are going to go further into the conversations, we have to look into it.
Well, let's dive in. Let's start with our consumers. Deep, I'm going to start with you. So around our consumers, what is the primary benefits consumers gain from open banking?
Yeah. As I stated earlier, right? So consumers in US are sitting on the passenger seat. They drive the 2/3 of our economy. And consumers with the open banking will get the benefit more insights into the data. And we are not going to stop just at the insights. Insights are going to drive an action. Let me give a very specific example. If I'm paying for my car loan to someone higher percentage, now this insights which I'm paying can come back and say, hey, Deep, we can help you save $200 a month if you get the loan from this company. Now, an average consumer needs that information. So what's going to happen is what consumers are going to start seeing, oh my God, it is my data and I was not aware of those insights. And now I'm aware of those insights and someone also helping me to take an action to make my financial wellness much more better. So this is how the ecosystem, what I'm seeing, the consumers are going to get pulled into it and the benefits they're going to see in the coming years from this open banking.
Deep, I really like that because for me, it's why should consumers care about open banking? Because I found that they don't necessarily, at least at this stage of the game. And I think there are other two pieces that plug into why should consumers care. There's also the general, what is open banking from the consumer's perspective? Just practically what they see on their end. And then the other part of it is this a risk to me? Because if people start talking about the back end and say, there's an issue related to your data being locked in your bank, and we're going to give you ways to use it in other ways, you wonder, how do you help the consumer understand that this is going to be secure and that it's going to be a benefit for them and what that process is going to look like within a fintech, for example, a kind of bank login flow or some other way of getting access to their data that feels like it's going to work for them, that it's going to be secure.
That's so true.
Kind of talking about the aspects of what benefits that consumers have. Deep, how aware do you think our consumers are about the banking services and their advantages today?
They're not. And, this is again going back to my earlier part. In 2003, I'm not that old to be candid, but I'm going to take you back because in 2003, it takes time for consumers to get to know those awareness, right? So when you think about the Portability Act in 2003, 2004, many consumers not aware, they were not aware of their rights. And then, we saw later, came the GDPR, then we saw the CCPA. All those policy changes takes time and our consumers are getting to know it, but I think there is more effort has to be put into a place. Within my own network of the people, I sometimes, on the social gatherings, I'm meeting with the people and I say, hey, what do you think about the open banking? There are still many of them, I'm seeing the blank faces today also. They have no idea what this open banking, and someone then make up the stories and say, oh, this is the data API exchange. So we are not there. I will say, Jamie, we are still on the infancy stage of that awareness curve. And it's going to take us some time where industry needs to come together to make and spend more time of making consumers aware of that.
Another piece of that, Deep, I think, is actually a lot of the banking industry making themselves aware of what open banking is and better understanding it. Because you hear open banking in the context of what we're talking about here when it comes to consumers' permissioned open access to their data at a financial institution, but it also comes up in conversations just as an API layer, for example, or some other sort of connectivity that isn't really open banking in the context we're talking about today, to the point that the term open banking probably needs a little bit more specific definition and better understanding.
I agree. And one comment I will say, Jamie, also, and Tyler, thanks for bringing this. At the end of the day, average consumer, they don't care about APIs. They don't care about the technology. So they care about, hey, what is there in for me, right? And I think this is where, Tyler, I'm with you. There are times I go and people talk about the open APIs. Hey, people like you and me can understand. Consumers don't care about that.
It's like the whole banking experience. It just has to work, right?
Yeah. We've been focusing on the benefits of open banking. Tyler, I'd like to hear from you. What do you feel are the main concerns for consumers regarding open banking?
For consumers, I think once, as we've been talking about it, they understand open banking, at least from a what can it do for them perspective. It becomes a security and a privacy question, which, as Deep was talking about, we have regulations that are starting to address some of those things. But for them, it's creating this comfort with logging into their bank from a third-party app. And I think a big part of it is allowing for the bank's brand and the trust with the bank to come forward. A big part of it is reassuring the consumer in practice, not just in words, that what they're doing with their financial data, which is very sensitive, is going to be A, of value to them, and B, is not going to cause any issues for them down the road when it comes to a data breach, for example.
Definitely.
And I'm going to just say, Jamie, one thing. That's a common theme what consumers are more worried about at this time. How this open banking is going to now uses my data from the breach point of view. Is my data going to be safe and secure? So Tyler, I like the way you said, because security and the data security is the foundational to the open banking.
Definitely. I do think that it's at the forefront of everybody's minds when they're sharing their personal information. Tyler, how about banking influence for consumers? As more tech fin companies and financial institutions are diving in, how do you feel the open banking will influence consumers' financial behavior and decision making?
I want to back up a little bit first and talk about the implementation of open banking before it's even able to influence what the vast majority of consumers in the US are able to do. In the CFPB draft regulation, there's this phase-in for compliance with open banking as written, and it goes over the course of between 6 months and 4 years or so. And so what first has to happen is you need this critical mass of consumers who are actually able to use open banking in a useful and a safe and a secure way. And when it comes to the long tail of financial institutions, it's going to take some time. When you look at the mega banks and some of the largest regional banks with these larger customer bases, I think it will be quicker. But first, we need to see enough consumers knowing what it is, seeing the value in it, and then having this widespread availability to them, whether it's kind of the third-party usage or whether it's the bank offering the portal that's allowing them to use open banking. At that point, I think we're going to see actually a lot of back-end usage because open banking started as more of a personal financial management use case and has since evolved into something that's more about initiating money transfers, for example, which was very useful when neobanks were incredibly popular with consumers. But then there are also things like fraud controls, for example, and cash flow-based underwriting, which consumers are not going to be as easily able to understand in those terms. But as Deep was starting to talk about, the functional effect, I think, will improve the banking experience overall for consumers.
Let's dive in from a financial institution perspective. So we've kind of heard the benefits and maybe the concerns. for end consumers, but now looking at the financial institutions. So, Deep, I will start with you. As we're starting to have more conversations about open banking, how do we feel this is going to impact the financial institution's relationship with their consumers, current and in the future?
Yeah, and I think there is going to be an impact, and impact is going to be felt across the board in the financial institutions. And there are, last few months I've been talking with, as I spend time with some of our customers and, talking to them, and I see they are not ready about this open banking. And what I meant by that is they had their front office, they had their mid office, and they had their back office. What I hear, oh, it's just going to impact our front layer, so we are not that concerned. And I think, to me, this is where things will go wrong. Open banking is going to impact across the board, from front office to mid office to the back office. And I think the financial institutions, those who needs to get ready to start the awareness piece to their current customers now, because that's the most important thing. And, one of the litmus tests I do, because I'm in this industry, and I'm not going to name that financial institution. So here in the Bay Area, San Francisco, I went to one of the branches in the bank, and I was having a conversation with the teller. And I said, what do you think about the open banking? And that teller was completely solid rock, not knowing what the open banking is. And I felt, oh my God. I said, can I talk to one of your advisors and have a converse? And I was just literally doing this just for my own education, preparing for this webinar. And I went to the manager and I said, hey, what do you think about, I'm just curious to know, as a member of your branch, what do you think open banking? Zero awareness, right? So you can see the trust can be eroded if we don't prepare for that. And so this is, to me, is the litmus test where, for the future, as you acquire more future customers or your existing members, if you are not going to increase the education and the training across the board in your organization, customers or members are going to start feeling, oh my God, is my financial institution ready? Do they know what needs to happen? Can they support me? And if their trust is going to go low and low and low, we know what's going to happen. They will
Two
go to
things
some
there.
other financial institution. Exactly.
Yeah. One of them is back to that issue where there's the internal bank struggle to define open banking. And then there's the internal communication issue, passing it down and training employees to be able to say what this actually is, as it matters to the consumer, and addressing any concerns they may have. But then the other part of it, Deep, I think, is not just being able to answer questions when a consumer asks. It's about this proactive outreach and education, because if you have to have a consumer come and ask, well, what is this open banking thing? Then as a financial institution, I think you've failed to educate your customer base about something that's going to change pretty significantly over the next few years.
That kind of dives into my next topic, Deep, where you were speaking to, someone right there on teller row, and even their financial advisor. How, I'll direct this to Tyler first. How do you go about educating your consumers and your staff about benefits and risks of open banking?
Well, I think I'll send it back to Deep for the internal FI perspective when it comes to educating from the back office to the front office about what open banking is. When it comes specifically to consumer education, in my opinion, it starts with when they discover a third-party app that they want to use for something, whether it's banking specific or some other product or service. And when they try and log in or attempt to do something with that third-party app, the bank then offers information and assistance that's going to help them understand that what they're doing is securely using their financial institution to share their data and therefore be able to use this service safely and securely. I think it's going to be less impactful when the bank is just pushing out information about what open banking is. Maybe there will be something on the margins when it comes to defining things on an educational page or some content marketing and marketing email, but really it's going to be in the flow of the consumer's activity where that education needs to happen.
Indeed, we would love to have you obviously pop into each branch and do your own education, but obviously that's not feasible, right? So from a fintech standpoint, or just being a good partner with financial institutions, I'd love to hear from you as far as good opportunities for education, both at the branch level and consumers.
And this is where, as Tyler was saying, Jamie, what we need to understand when the change happens, there are multiple personas which get impacted with the change. Number one is, I'm a consumer. How this change is going to impact me. I'm in the financial institution. How this is going to impact the teller. I think education is one part of the problem statement that what we need to do. But I think just stopping at the education part is not going to solve the problems. We need to prepare for it too. And to me, this is where institutions and need to prepare for it. How I'm going to make sure that my employee base across the board is ready. And the second part is my technology ready? Now, on top of it, we are going to enter into the economy discussion where there are opportunities going to come. This is where the fintechs, there are other companies which is going to start popping up. And this is where I feel the financial institutions needs to look into, is their digital platform ready to accept the change which is coming in? And I think that to me is the second part of the puzzle what institutions have to solve.
What a great segue to dive into what open banking means for our economy. So, and if you could just allude a little bit more on that, how do you feel open banking contributes to the economic growth and innovation?
Yeah, I think I come from the school of consumer fanatic system, right? Where I care about the consumers the most and the members, right? That's what I care about. When I look into the broader economy and in my technology experience, I was blessed enough to be part of transforming the real estate industry, right? So coming before to Varo Bank, I was at zero. There was a period of time when home buying and selling was the process which needs to happen face to face. You have to go and collect the data. And then the time came when the whole system changed and became everything online now, right? People collect the data. I see open banking heading in the similar kind of a direction where more opportunities are going to start popping up across, like what technology we need to build, what infrastructure we need to build from the open banking, there are more and more innovation, and we are already seeing a lot of funding going on by the investors to bring more insights from the transactions data. And the other area which I'm now interestingly seeing is the marriage of online and offline. What people are realizing, digitization doesn't mean that all the banking is just the online. You still need to go to the branches for the time. How the marriage of those two, online and offline, going to happen? So what I expect, our economy is going to go through the next phase of the transformation in the banking space where consumers are going to win because now consumers have more power on their data. They're going to demand better customer service, better incentive for them. But at the same time, this is also going to enable more financial institutions to look into their internal technology stack. But what I'm more excited about being part of the innovation front, how we are going to take all this data and what we are going to do with this data. I think that to me, what we are all about to see is that part of the change which is going to come to our way. And, this is ultimately also going to impact how the money get transferred, the payment rails, because this is not just going to stop at one place. This is going to be across the board economy. And I'm looking forward to where our economy, US economy thrives, but it benefits consumers and it benefits the financial institutions. So that's the way I'm looking into how the economy is going to react to those changes.
I imagine there's a whole lot of things that are going to happen that we can't even imagine right now. Actually, when you think ahead with the economy, my brain goes beyond just the banking and payments industries, and it moves toward what we thought of as open finance and even the open data economy. When you have this portability across insurance, for example, and brokerage and banking, and then ultimately moving on to perhaps we have better access to healthcare data, for example, or utility data, and have this ability to bring together, the consumer has the ability to bring together all of their personal data, no matter where it is throughout the economy, and use it in ways that are going to make their lives more convenient. I think it's going to be a little ways out for that when you look at what's happening both in the industry and from a regulatory perspective. I don't think we're quite to open finance and then open data is even further out, but it's a dream that could happen someday, and open banking really is the starting point for that.
I agree with you, Tyler. I think open banking is the foundational aspect of this, what about to happen, because without this strong foundation, you cannot innovate, because this is an enablement of the innovation. And that is the reason when I read this open banking, I said, okay, now finally, this is coming out. I got excited because you can build the skyscrapers on the top of the strong foundation. So that's the way I look into it.
As you speak about innovation, you're going to see some tech fans and some financial institutions dive in first rather than others sit back and kind of wait to see how this pans out. A big topic in those conversations is competition within the financial service industry. How do you think open banking will influence the competition?
Tyler, you want to go? You want me to go first?
Sure. When it comes to open banking and competition, actually, the first thing that I think about is deposit switching in the UK, where the legislation has forced banks to make it much easier for consumers to move actually their money in between financial institutions. And when you have this portability of data with open banking now in the United States, you have this ability to use it to move money for one, but also move data around depending on the services that are available and what the best consumer experience is. And so I think what we'll see is that consumers will feel less locked in to one financial institution and maybe even more interested in maybe not changing primary FI, but adding services to what's their existing relationship in ways that are going to benefit them.
Yeah. And the way I look into, Jamie, competition, there was a time, the old days where competition used to be how companies used to see them as a threat, and they used to find the ways to kill each other with some IPs and all those things. So those days are gone, right? So now the way I look into is the competition is the one which keeps innovation keep on thriving, right? That's the way I look into it. And where I see this is going to enable many spaces, right? So for example, how do we provide better services to the consumers? I see a big impact of this is going to happen where, the customer service is going to improve because, there are times I hear from consumers, hey, I don't like the, how they treat me as a customer. So that's the one part which I definitely looking forward to, how the customer service engagement going to improve. So there are more and more innovative things going to come on that front. But also I think on the competition front, as Tyler, you were talking about the open data, the open finance, there are so many industries we are not talking about: the insurance industry, the lending industry. It is ultimately going to impact. And what I feel open banking is going to enable, that financial institutions are there to serve you, but the data is spread across the ecosystem, and it can be on a shopping site, and my shopping site is integrated with this, my financial institution or the payment system, but my data is still owned and operated by me, which I think is currently you see in the industry where my content, but others goes and use the machine learning to get the insights and they take the benefit. So I think that's where the competition going to come more and more, which is not just in the financial institutions, but other industries also needs to adjust to this and bring the more technologies out for the consumers.
Deep, I love that, bringing us back to the beginning of this conversation where you're talking about GDPR and data ownership as a consumer right, as opposed to something that doesn't happen because the custodian of the data owns the data, at least by their mind. And now when you have this paradigm shift in who owns the data, the consumer's ability to use it wherever they want and to feel like their data is safe and secure with them in a way is really going to make a difference.
So we've talked a little bit about innovation and competition. Tyler, I would love your perspective on how you feel open banking will contribute, specifically those topics, to the resilience and the stability of the U.S. financial system.
I think the strength of the financial system, particularly the retail banking aspect, is built upon the comfort and confidence of the consumer, both as individuals and at large. And so it's not about open banking per se that creates this kind of consumer confidence, but it's the philosophy around open banking and the data ownership that I think is going to create this additional level of confidence, not in the banking system for the sake of banking, but in the banking system because they feel that their data is more secure, that they're able to use their data better, and that they're not locked into a particular financial institution all the time, but because they're able to use other products, that they're going to be less likely to jump and therefore create this level of stability for certain financial institutions that actually might not have been there because they would have to switch completely in order to change services.
So we've dove into consumers, financial institutions, and the economy, which is really the base of what open banking is going to look like. Once those are more aligned and in place, we dive into data portability, which essentially will make everything go round, right? Deep, I'm going to start with you. What are the key benefits of the data portability for consumers in the open banking ecosystem?
Yeah. And I get excited about this space because this is where it just changes the way we work, right? So because today, Jamie, if you think about how do I operate, right? So I have my financial institution, I set up my direct deposit, I set up my bill pay, I set up everything, okay? Even though how many consumers are there in many, many years when they started their direct deposit and bill pay with the financial institution, how often do they move? They don't move because the pain what they have to carry of switching cost. I need to now switch this, I need to switch this. And then if my payments are delayed by 2 days, I'm going to get penalized. So our system has built to stay with one and continue to get what you want. But now imagine a day when I have all this information about my direct deposit, my employer, my route, everything with my bill pay, with how I want to transfer the money, my recurring transfers on piece of my device, which I carry with me. It is like my personal finance card which encapsulate all my data. I go to the new financial institution, online or offline. Hey, I want to partner up with you. Sure, they do my KYC, they do all those things. I just use this device. I exchange my keys with them and all of my data transferred there. Let me give a specific example. I have changed my phone providers multiple times. There used to be a time, man, I have all these apps, I have all those things. It's going to be painful process for me to change my provider because I was fearful of losing my data. That's the reason I don't change the provider. Nowadays, you want to change your phone provider, you go, they bring you the new device, the SIM gets replaced, your data from this phone to this phone, you leave the provider, and you're fully active. That's the day which I'm looking forward to, where we as the consumers own all my data here, and I decide I want to change my financial institution. Boom, my data get transferred. But then I also decide I want to share my data with this fintech because they can give me the insights. I can just give them the data what I have under the data portability and have them start using it ASAP. And that's what I think for me, what I'm trying to push and see how the industry is going to go in this direction, because this is when it start getting more and more exciting.
Yeah, I think, things are still not concrete. We are seeing more regulations being reviewed and trickle down through the pipelines. But so far, from what has been shared recently within the 1033 rule, what protocols and standards do you see being put in place to make sure that data portability?
Yeah. So I think when we look into from the technology pieces, I think we had the secure storage on the devices. We have more, how do we access our data on the devices? I think there are more and more biometrics and the pass key. So I think technologies which we think about can persist the data in a seamless way on a device exist today. More harnessing needs to happen. I think what we still don't have is the data exchange. And this is what, Tyler, you were talking about, the open data APIs. How do we define the standards and the specifications on how this data is moving around the ecosystem, which is then consumed by everyone in the same way? I think that is the area. The third area, which I think is the amount of data, because today the transactions when we are doing online and offline, it is one time maximum transactions. As a retail, I can do 10. But now if I'm uploading too much of a data, is the infrastructure ready? So I think the pieces of the technology and the protocol, how the data gets transferred, those exist. Where the gaps are still in our system, and which is going to start happening now, is what are the common specifications we need to build around what data needs to get transferred, how it needs to happen. Is it in the real time? Is it in the batch based? Is it how it goes from one device to the other device? Those are the things which I think pieces gonna come together. But we all heard about APIs. APIs have been in existence for a long time now. So technologies exist, protocols exist, but the glue is the one which is going to start coming together now.
Yeah. And Tyler, that brings us to a good point. So as far as data portability goes, what do you feel like our main challenges are associated with open banking?
I think it actually comes down to what's going to be happening right after the rule is finalized within that phase-in period I was talking about earlier, which is how do they put in place these open banking APIs on top of the hamburger tech stack that most of them have beneath it. Because a big part of the challenge isn't necessarily just building an API layer on top. It's about dealing with the data security issues the resilience of the tech stack issues related to pulling data that the financial institution has and then being able to share it with fintechs, other third parties at the consumer's request.
And I think, Tyler, there is another area which I feel the big banks, I think they are doing a good job preparing themselves. But I think the gap what I'm going to see, if consumers will come and say, I want my data to be shared with this fintech and this fintech and this fintech. I'm intentionally not naming those fintechs, because there are many those are coming. What's going to happen is those fintechs are going to then connect with the financial institutions to get the data back. Are the financial institutions ready with their infrastructure and platform? Because the traffic is about to double. Even if they sign one fintech and they say, oh, I want only to send to this fintech. My transactions, if I have 100,000 consumers or members on my financial institution, and even 50% wants to connect, your traffic just double. Are you ready? Can you scale? Right? And that's, to me, is going to be where the challenge is going to come in that space. That's the one. The second is going to come, I'm going to, as a consumer, going to come and say, I don't want any longer to share my data with this fintech. How you're going to now ensure that that is being blocked? How you're going to ensure that that data has been purged? Because when you look into GDPRs and the CCPAs, that's what they were driving. That consumer can come and say, I want to remove the data. So that's the second area of the challenge going to come. How we're going to make sure that unlinking and purging aspect of the business.
So Deep kind of alluded to what he sees as far as data portability and how it will evolve in the open banking ecosystem. Tyler, I'd also love to hear from you as far as what do you see going into the future as far as data portability goes?
Well, we were talking a little bit earlier about the open finance and open data ecosystem portability. I think those are both worthy goals. They're going to happen someday, but they're a while out, seeing we don't even have a widespread open banking yet as the starting point. Although I think within open banking, we are going to see baby steps. After we reach this ideal of all financial institutions having open banking APIs and being able to participate in this ecosystem, we're going to start to see consumers saying, not just I want my bank data, but I want my data from all of my financial products and services, or I want my data from adjacent products and services that I use to pay with my bank account, for example. And I want to bring that all together in one place. And that one place is going to need to be able to handle that data exchange, those privacy issues related to records retention, and then not to mention all of the security challenges that come with it. It's not just about the open banking API that the financial institution has, but it's about understanding the third parties that are involved and what's going to happen with consumers' data once it goes to the other side.
So we've kind of talked about the 4 pillars of open banking. We want to wrap up quickly. Before we do have a quick poll for you. It just regards to, the 5 ways financial institutions can prepare themselves for open banking. So please go ahead and take that poll and then we'll move forward. I want to do a high-level overview, and then I would love to give closing thoughts from both Deep and Tyler. But as far as the 5 top initiatives that we've recognized here to prepare for open banking is evaluate the current condition your FI is in. Identify areas needed, upgrades, or new implementations to meet the open banking requirements. So very much similar to what Deep and Tyler were talking about is, can you handle the data once it's available to you? Develop your strategic open banking roadmap. What are you going to prioritize to make sure that you're ready for the future? Define what success looks like for your institution. Also building partnerships. So as Deep and Tyler alluded to, there are a lot of tech and companies out there that already started to look at ways to solve for what will be coming down with new regulation requirements, but also innovation and competition. Identifying and establishing partnerships with those tech fins can be very beneficial to you as an institution. Invest in technology. Educate your consumers. Educate your internal staff. Or we can always send Deep around to all the different branches and you can talk to all of them there.
And I'll be the teller.
No, but it's very important, right? It's very important to invest in modern, scalable infrastructures and making sure that you are ready for the future and what this means for the financial system. And then lastly, I would say is monitor, make sure that you are prepared to adapt a new strategy. As regulations evolve, things can change quickly, timelines can be short, and we just want to make sure that you as a financial institution are very well prepared and nothing comes as a surprise. So again, I've enjoyed our conversation today. Tyler and Deep, I'm going to start with you for closing thoughts here today on our conversation.
Yeah. And I think what I will say, embrace this change. This change is here. This change is here to stay. And make sure that, as Jamie laid out on this slide, look into it. Don't ignore it. And I think that's the mistake we have seen in the industry again and again. The denial phase, oh, this is not going to impact me. But, this is going to impact all of us, as we talked about. So my closing thoughts are, work with your partners, work with your tech firms. If you are an Alkami's customer, we are here to help you and we are getting ready for it. But embrace it. That's, to me, is my closing thought.
I have two closing thoughts to follow on that. One is about the consumer, and one is about the financial institution strategy and technology. And as we've been talking about, I think it's important to remember that the demand for open banking does ultimately come from the consumer. We have this now regulation that's coming that's going to enforce open banking. But the reason that we have this industry that has grown up over the last 10 years is because it's something that consumers want and what consumers want to do with their data. The second thing is a message for financial institutions, which is open banking is not something to just let happen, because it's going to happen more quickly than anyone can imagine at this point. And from an executive and from a board level, it's time to have these kinds of discussions, because figuring it out from an internal perspective and an external perspective, both related to people and technology, are pretty significant undertakings.
This has been very enlightening. I hope all of you found this information helpful. Again, we will send out a recorded webinar to you via email, and we will chat soon. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.